So good morning, everyone. Thanks for hanging with us. We were having a little bit of some technical difficulties, but I think we're all good to go now. Our guest today is Howard Gentry, the Honorable Howard Gentry. Sorry, I forgot that part, Howard. The criminal court clerk, former vice mayor, former councilman, just a good guy. So Howard, thanks for being our guest today. We appreciate you being on. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Jim. And go on and let them know it's my fault. You know, the vice mayor never makes mistakes. And so we don't want the world to think that the vice mayor just made a mistake here. But I'm on.
The vice mayor makes lots of mistakes, Mr. Gentry, as you know.
Wow.
We all live through them. Yes, Mr. Gentry was the vice mayor when I was on the council, and I did an excellent job, and I learned from him. All the good things that I've done, Howard, are because of you. All the bad things that I've done, I take full responsibility for. They weren't.
Yeah, okay, please do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we're really glad you're here. First question that I always ask everybody, and we've been doing this for a while, is tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you're a part of Nashville. Your family's a part of Nashville. Tell people who don't really know you personally a little bit about yourself. You know, growing up, where you went to school, that type of thing.
Well, I am from Nashville, and I've been here a bunch of years. And I went to public school here in Nashville. I went to Murphy School before it was an alternative to school. Some people still think that I went to alternative school. I probably should have. I went to Head Elementary School and then Pearl High School, well, Washington Junior High School, and then Pearl High School. A lot of these schools people don't know about now. Pearl Cone sits on the property of Washington Junior High School. Head is still here. As a matter of fact, one of my daughters went to Head, Ryan. And of course, the MLK is now Pearl High School is now MLK. But I had a very amazing educational journey back in those days. You had teachers who knew you. You went to school in your communities. You were able to walk to school, and it was just fun. I went to Florida A&M to play football. I played football in high school. I played football at Florida A&M. Got hurt my second year and ended up coming home and finishing school at Tennessee State University, the school I've always loved and the school I still love today. My journey is, has been a good journey, but we've had some tough times through that journey. My parents came here in 1949. They both worked at Tennessee State University. We came here during segregation, so life was complicated by segregation or as a result of segregation, but we managed to not survive it, but also to thrive as a result of it, not because of any outward programs of help, but more so because of inward strength from our families, from our parents, preachers, teachers, preparing us to be able to move forward when our time came and when times changed. And so I always tell people that Nashville and Howard Gentry have grown up together, both personally, professionally, politically, academically, and socially. And so it has been a great journey and still is.
So let me ask you, let me go back to some of that. So I didn't know your dad, but I knew your mother, who I thought was, and will always think is one of the greatest people I've ever met. I loved your mom more than I love you, because I just thought the world of her.
I'd like to say, Jim, I love my mom more than I love you. So we have.
Yeah, I figured as much. I figured that. So tell me that inward strength. I mean, her character. her strength, her ability just always showed. But she cared so much for people. That inward strength, particularly during those tough times, what was that? Where did they get that, and what was that?
They got it through the fire. Through the fire. I mean, you know, if my mother died at 95 years old, she'd be 90, I guess, 7 now, 96, 97. She was born almost 100 years ago, and then her parents were born not, you know, more than 50, close to 100 years before. So they came through a very tough time. Both of my great grandfathers were slave owners on both sides of the family, and so my grandparents were born into slavery, and they were children. But so time was survival was all they knew, and so growing up, my mother was the youngest of 13. Her the 14th died at childbirth, and her mother died at childbirth when my mom was 9 months old. And so she was on the property of the former slave owner because he gave the property to the children of his son. And so they you would think, oh wow, they have property, but they were sharecroppers. They didn't really own the property at that time, and it was tough. And the father, my granddaddy on my mother's side, had a drinking problem, so they could not leave my mother with him for long. So she had to move to a farm where an uncle and aunt were, and then from that farm to live with a sister, and then to live with another sister in a different city, Greenville, South Carolina, to Boston, Massachusetts, where the family had moved north to get out of the South, so to speak, and they went as far as they could. So they she was taken to different sisters and brothers and raised by her siblings, and nobody really had any real finances, but they survived. And my mom wasn't planning to go to college, but her sisters and brothers, they didn't get to go. They had that plan for her. So when she graduated from high school, she was planning to be a secretary in a dance school that she worked, but they had a different plan. So they paid for her to start to go to Howard University, where another sister lived in Washington and had moved to Washington. And she lived with her sister and her brother-in-law. And my mother worked at this dance studio, and she had learned dance. So she ended up getting a scholarship, but also worked as RA at a dormitory. And she was able to graduate from Howard University, a university she had never heard of until they told her that she was going to Howard. Same with my dad. He didn't go to college right after high school. He was an athlete, and a coach came through and told his brother he wanted to take him to Florida A&M University to play football. My dad never heard of Florida, but my uncle packed his bags and told him, "You're going." And that's how they both ended up in college. And they met at North Carolina A&T on their first job. And history was made then. And my mother was always a fighter. She always, she was deep in her faith, but she never liked discrimination of anyone, and that doesn't mean just racial. My mother was just, she was a kind of a silent lady if you really didn't know her. She talked a lot, but she didn't talk loud. But my mother was a fierce fighter for human rights. And so the civil rights movement and the civil rights effort just fell into her lap because she was already a feisty person that believed in right. She always told us it's more people doing right than wrong. There's more people doing good things and bad things, and you just got to keep doing right. And she always believed it, and she always fought for it, and she never stopped.
So Howard, let me, because a number of the questions that came in over the week dealt with your role as criminal court clerk, but also seemed to go back to, how Nashville is changing, how we have so many things still left kind of on the table, including equity. Your role as criminal court clerk, you deal with, the criminal justice system. There's a lot of discussion about reform. If you don't mind, stay with what we were talking about, particularly with your mom and your dad growing up in Nashville. What did you experience back then? And there were questions about, what have we been able to change, and what do we still need to change to try to get this right?
Well, growing up in Nashville was, like I said, it was fun because we were able to have what we needed and enjoy our existence in a predominantly African, and sometimes, most times, totally African American community at that time, which was thriving in all ways. And so we didn't feel the sting of segregation until you moved out of that space. And unfortunately, the space was not large. And so you were in and out of that space on a daily basis. So Nashville was it was an ugly place outside of that space. Anytime you're a kid growing up and you're not allowed to go to a grocery store or a park or a swimming pool or school, and you're not allowed to walk across the street from where you live and go to a ice cream shop or a pharmacy or Crystal, or the restaurants. I'm not going to call their names because they're not, go to the history books, but restaurants that are still here today, and not be able to do that. It always had you unsettled. You lived in fear because you heard about the lynchings, and you heard about the killings, and you heard about the arrest and the way people of color were treated. You heard about the bombings. I mean, we even had bomb scares at First Baptist Church, Capitol Hill, where we had to leave the church on numerous occasions. The old church that we used to have on 8th Avenue, the old location. And as children, to be ushered out of a church and for the police and the dogs to go through sniffing and what have you, to see that, to really witness it, was hard. And even me as a teenager, being arrested at 17 years old for attempted murder that I didn't have a clue about, but I just fit the profile and have a shotgun to my head, taken to jail when I was too young to go to jail, and to finally get to juvenile court and be taken home under house arrest, not knowing whether they were going to ever find the people that did it. Fortunately, they did catch them and match the gun, and I guess all was good for them. But I lost my job, and I was working for the farmers market, Kroger, and they investigated me. The investigators came and Kroger fired me. They offered me my job back, but I didn't take it. And to go through those experiences all the way up to a 17, 18-year-old, and then to still feel the sting of it, even moving into my early adult years, it was tough. It was tough, and it left a scar. And I've always had to fight that monster, I call it, that was always wanting to lash out, but afraid. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you really wanted to fight, but you were actually afraid to fight. First thing, you didn't know really what to fight or who to fight or how wide or how far it was going to go, or what the result was going to be. But you're not doing it because you've been told that that's not the way to move forward. That's not the way to move into integration, and that's fighting, physically and verbally, but to be prepared to step in and do, to utilize your education, to utilize your training, to utilize your humility and forgiveness in that. That's hard to understand as a young person, but the older people have already been in the fire. They're in the fire right now. They know what the fire feels like, and they know that once the fire dies down, you have that opportunity to move forward and to take advantage of the things they fought for. It's hard to control yourself and to subdue yourself. So it creates this inner fire that you really want to let it out, but you know better, or at least you're trusting what your parents, what your preachers and teachers are telling you, what you see going on around you. And so to live through that is not easy. But my parents were models. They lived through a worse period than I did. And they were able to do the things the right way. So I had that model and I was able to move through. I look at today and I want to say that having been one of the first African Americans elected countywide, the first vice mayor, the first criminal court clerk, and now we've got others that have followed. I want to say that everything's great. I want to say that Nashville has really come to a great place, and we have taken huge steps, and I have to applaud that. But the truth is, I'm seeing some of the same things now that I saw when I was that scared little kid growing up. And I'm seeing it in my face, and I'm seeing it, our children are seeing it. And so when I look at what we're going through now, I am optimistically in belief that we're going to get to a better place, but we've got a lot to do. We've got a lot to do, and I just feel that people are a little too comfortable that we're already there, and but we've got a lot of work to do, and it's just the work we have to do.
So let me ask you this, and in a minute, I'm going to ask you what the criminal court clerk's office does. But before I get to that,
well, before you get to that, let me tell you, it's a lot of the same in the criminal justice system. So it'll be a similar conversation.
I figured as much, and you can incorporate it. I do want to thank Council Member John Rutherford is on the call, and our County Clerk Brenda Wynn is on the call. So thank you both for being here. So so one of the questions that came in during the week, maybe one of the more interesting ones was, if you could be, I think it was emperor for the day or whatever. I'd probably say more of, if I could give you a magic wand and say, based upon how you grew up, your historic knowledge, what you've seen, and now here we are today. And you indicated that things are better than they were, but there's so many things still on the table. I guess the question would be, in your role as criminal court clerk, as a former vice mayor, as a candidate for mayor, if you could do 2-3 things with that magic wand to get this city to fix some of those remaining issues, outstanding issues, new issues that have come, what would you do? And it's kind of an unfair question to you, but I think people trust you, and you've been a part of this city. It's a hard question, but these hard questions are what we're facing these days. So how would you try to answer that question?
Well, it is. I mean, I guess it's a hard question. I guess it's harder to listen to the answer. Mm-hmm. And it is, well, at least with me, it is. It's harder, probably for the person that doesn't agree, to listen to the answer. But it's really not that hard a question to answer. But I will say, since we have some people on the looking that might not know that I did run for mayor in the past, that I'm not a candidate for mayor now and I won't be. So That was the last thing you ended it with. I'm going to stay right where I am, and we're not going to be political here, but I'm going to plan to be here for the next 4 years.
All right.
But yeah,
Now that we're clear on that.
yeah, we're clear
Okay.
on that. Yeah, yeah. So, but the fact is that if I were emperor, um, the first thing I would be an example of doing the right thing. And our emperors haven't been an example. And unfortunately, our emperors now are politicians who are sometimes more worried about keeping their office than they are about taking care of their kingdom. And so it's not a family that grows and is born into this family of emperors and grows, that takes care of their country and their people. Um, I would not, as I am right now, I just would not lead um, in a manner where I am worried about the political outcome of my decisions. I would lead on fairness. I would lead uh, on equity. I would lead on righteousness and stand on what is best for the people. And when I um, create policies and work to create financial budgets, I would do it with the people in mind, not the will of the people. I guess the will of the people is important, and you could argue that is the people, but uh, uh, okay, let's change that. Not with political will, but the 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 needs of the people, and lead in a manner that all people are given an equitable chance or opportunity to succeed. Um, I would I would probably I would be speaking this way as your emperor, and it would not be popular because there are people that don't want fairness. That don't feel that people should be equal or equitable in all circumstances, and they would fight this, and they wouldn't like me as their leader, but or as their emperor, so to speak. But these are the bold steps that we're going to have to take. We're going to have to take to be able to right this ship. You have to sacrifice. You have to be willing to lose. You have to be willing to die for those causes. I was raised in that manner. It makes it difficult for some people to deal with me because I actually have a father that told me that if I truly believed in something, I should be willing to die for it. I should be willing to give my life for my family, for my country. If that's what I'm doing, I should be willing to sacrifice, to take a loss for a gain. And I, some people accuse me of wanting to be a martyr. I don't want to die. I don't want to fall on a sword for anything, but I'm willing to, and I'm not going to back off if if that is possibly the result or the outcome, because you can't truly, you cannot truly lead people in a way that will allow them to go places and move into areas that they never dreamed they could go or be if you're not willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for them to be able to have that opportunity. See, I don't believe it's a difficult thing to do. I believe it's difficult for people to bring themselves to the point of doing it. And so if you wanted me to talk about particular laws and particular policies and what have you, they would all just have to fall in line with what I just said. if we really believe, as we say, that and I'm going to go there because I ride all over the city and I see people that don't look like me with signs saying Black Lives Matter. If you truly believe that, then your laws have to reflect it. Your actions have to reflect it. Your sacrifices have to reflect it. Or if it's uh, the a different culture or just anyone that is different from what you believe is normal, because that doesn't mean it's different just because you think it should be normal. But you have to be willing to change and accept those things. And if you're not willing to do it, if you're not willing to show it, if you're not willing to move into your circles where people don't believe it but you do and speak up about it, then your silence is just as bad as their violence. And that's a challenge. That's just wrong. So I'm like my mom. I just lead on the side of right, on the side of fairness, and let the chips fall as they may. But if I can convince people to follow me, then they're going to fall in the right place.
So I've always thought, and you and I have maybe had this conversation, that when you run for office and when you serve in office, there are things that you should be willing to fall on your sword on, because we're in office for a limited amount of time. People follow us. That's just the way our system works. And if you're going to do something, you have to do it. You have that limited window when you're in office where you can make a difference. But there are some things that are not going to be very popular that you have to be willing to say, you know what, we have to do this. And doesn't matter if it gets you beat or not, if it makes you lots of enemies, because you try to do what's right. So you just said it. So I guess my question would be to you, pick a policy or two or more, or a law change that, or something else, some type of policy change that would lead, that you think would lead us to, better solutions. I guess that's the way I would say it.
Well, let's move inside the criminal court and criminal justice system, so
All right.
we could at least for a few minutes talk about what we do here, because I know the discussion we're having is important, but just one in particular inside the criminal justice system is when people have paid their dues or debts to society, when people have paid their debt through prison or jail or what have you, for their records to automatically be expunged in expungible, statutorily expungible circumstances, without them having to go through a process that they don't even know they have to do, because other states are doing it. So it's a policy that is not abnormal, so to speak. That is, it's criminalizing. It's regressive. When a person steps out of the penitentiary and maybe it's whatever the case is, but if the statute allows them to have their records expunged, why make them have to first find out about it, because nobody's telling them, nobody's giving them that information in advance? Why not allow for that record to just automatically be done with, and fines and fees be done with? I mean, as long as they have to continue to pay the fines for their crime and to have a record that follows them the rest of their lives, and I mean, if it's a rape, murder, something like that, maybe that needs to be looked at a little differently. But most of the crimes, especially in the jail, that are committed are misdemeanors. We've got we've got over 150,000 people walking around this city whose records could be expunged if they knew that they need to come in here and ask. But since they don't know, because they're not told or haven't been told in the courtroom, haven't been told by the lawyers, haven't been told, no documentation upon release that they could be expunged. They don't know why they're not getting a job, why they're not getting apartments or able to do things that a normal person or a person goes normal again, a person that has not experienced those things has done, and it's just unfair. It's unjust. It's sinful. It's sinful. The burdens we put on people who make mistakes in the criminal justice system are just totally unfair, and unfortunately, it affects the poor and people of color more than anyone else. And it's wrong. It's wrong. So what you got is millions of people who, if it were not for that lack of information and for that lack of fairness, could be voters in our community. They could be productive citizens living a life that they deserve to live. But because we have these regressive laws, these criminalizing continuous burdens that we place upon people who have made mistakes, they are not equal in society and not able to live as a truly free person. And it's just totally unfair. So I'll just pick that one, and I can run with that one all day.
Well, so let me ask you, so my guess is it's a state law that governs the process, correct? Okay. So one thing is to change the state law. The other one, particularly, you would think that if, and I don't know if they could do it or not, but particularly when people are coming out of the system, they need to know that they have the ability to do it. If it's not, if the state law doesn't change to immediately just expunge, they should know what the process is and how to go about doing it to make it easy for them.
They should know, and that's what we're doing in this department. And of course, the criminal court clerk's office is responsible for keeping the records, basically for keeping all records of the court. So from the time a person is arrested and booked, their record begins, and we keep that record forever. And if people don't know that they can expunge that record, then that record just stays there for eternity. And we've got records all the way from the 1800s that we still store. So we have warehouses of paper and records because we cannot get I would love to get an order to be able to expunge people's records without them having to go through that. But one problem that has occurred in the past, and it's getting better now because we're doing a better job, is when a person comes into the courtroom, they're not being told through their process that once they are done and the judge finally does whatever the judge is going to do as it relates to what happens in the courtroom, they're not being told that they have an opportunity. One legal statement is dismissed on cause. So that means you walk in the courtroom and your case is heard and it's dismissed, but dismissed on cause. Well, we don't learn when we go to school. I don't know that there's any sentence or anything that I've ever learned in school where on cause is utilized. So it's a legal term. And if a person hears that, that's not telling them, it is telling them that they owe money, but they don't hear that. They hear dismissed, and they just hear the word on cost. But in the past, those people were not told your case is dismissed, but you owe the clerk or you owe the courts $150. And if you go to the clerk's office, you can pay it or get on a payment plan, or if you're indigent or don't have the ability to pay, you can work with the clerk's office to be able to have those types of things handled. You do not get those opportunities without knowing in advance. Our judges and our lawyers, public defenders, and our DA, even the DAs are doing a better job of doing that now. But in the past, there were only few judges and legal people that were telling those people, and it is information that actually can put the person on the path of getting their records expunged quickly and a lot more easily than they do. But instead, they leave the courthouse and they don't know these things. And you've got other issues too, because the majority of the people who are incarcerated, who actually are do come through this courthouse, they're usually people who are poor and indigent. And there's a lot of challenges that go along with being poor and indigent. And one is you might not have the education to understand these things in the manner that you need to. Matter of fact, a lot of things, you don't go to law school, you don't know it anyway. And then if you are poor, people move a lot. So therefore they don't get the information if they're having, if they have to leave and move to another address. And then you have a huge population who are homeless, don't have an address in the first place. So their legal problems just continue to mount and grow and become insurmountable in their minds. And so something can grow from $100 fine and fee to $1,000 if they're not coming back to court, or if they're not coming to a follow-up hearing or what have you. So it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. We're doing better. We are doing better, and we have things in place to help them. We're getting ready to start texting, because it appears that everybody's got a phone. And when we get the texting process together within our office, then, and it's going to happen soon, people will start getting notices a lot better and information a lot better, even to know that they can get their records expunged. We'll be sending that kind of information out to them, but they still would have left the courthouse. And it would be so great if we could find or put the system together to kind of keep them in here a few more minutes to explain it all to them. But then you have a large population that that is leaving from the jail, and they don't necessarily have the opportunity to walk across the street to our office if our office is, if it's after closing or what have you. So it's a process that needs work. We're working from within to develop the technology that will allow this type of information. We have already developed the technology that allows people to know that they owe money and where to come. And the courts are presenting that information to the people who come in. But we've got so much history. We didn't start this technology till about 8 years ago or 6 years ago. So the people prior to that didn't have the opportunities that they have now. So there's a lot of work to be done. We're doing a lot of work, but it takes the entire criminal justice community to make it work effective.
Well, so it seems like I'm sitting there listening to you said, and I'm thinking about an individual, either with a lawyer, public defender, the DA's talking, everything's going on, and the judge says something and they hear the word dismissed, and it's like, I want to get out of here. I want to get out of here. The problem is there are certain things that, besides just word dismissed or whatever the court says, an explanation like in terms of expungement, like in terms of cost, so that these things don't mount up. And I'm glad to hear that we're doing a better job of it.
Absolutely.
But it just seems like that's one that we should be able to fix just by making sure before somebody gets out of the building, they understand what else they may need to do to take care of the situation. So it doesn't follow them or haunt them as they go through.
Right.
So I really do appreciate what you're doing on that level. We're getting a lot of questions through the chat box about bail reform. And
Yep.
I know there's been issues about it. I know you've been involved with it. I know there are concerns. And I think somebody is on, and I can hear myself twice, which is scary enough to hear myself once. But tell us a little bit about what you can about discussions about bail reform, what's being looked at, that type of thing.
Well, you know, I'm not going to go deep into bail reform because we have 15 minutes, unless if you're actually on an hour schedule. But I will be surface with it. Bail needs to be reformed. Bail is another thing as expungency is that is regressive, is criminalizing. It punishes people in a way that it's just across the board unfair. The bail process, I would like to see the bail process, especially on cash bonds, go away. You know, you saw that I got sued, and I had to be sued because I was the criminal court clerk. Didn't like it, and I spoke out about the fact that I didn't like the fact that I got sued. But guess what? I agreed with the lawsuit. I just didn't like to be the one getting sued, and didn't think I should have been. But the fact is, I'm the clerk. I'm the one that has to collect, and I'm the one that's my job statutorily. And if a judge tells me to do something, or the statute tells me to do something, I got to do it, and that's just the way it is. But it's unfair, especially as it relates to third parties. Third parties shouldn't have to be punished and be required to pay someone's court costs and fines if they're making bail for them. It's just we look at bail and bond as an opportunity for someone to be able to be released from custody until proven guilty. And I guess if you want to just look at it on the surface like that, sounds good. But the process by which it is meted out from the amount to the payment and how it is handled needs to either be fixed or blown up. And it might need to be blown up and fixed, but it's got to be changed. It's just wrong.
So people are sending,
it puts a burden on poor people. It just
right.
does.
So people are sending messages in, and maybe some people don't actually understand the whole system, but if we were to get rid of having to pay a bail to get out, the courts would still have the ability in some certain circumstances, if a serious enough crime, to hold an individual in.
Yep.
But basically, people would be on minor offenses, would be released, and then they come back in for their court. They don't have to pay to get out of jail. Right. And obviously, yeah, I knew that you were part of the lawsuit. My guess is that there are still statutory requirements that you as the criminal clerk must comply with. And you've got judges that are telling you that you must comply with certain orders. But is there going to be, and there probably already has been, but is there a continuing discussion at least from the Davidson County standpoint, working with the courts, to take another look at this and see if there's a better way to do this?
Well, yeah, I think we're all looking at it right now. I mean, we're all looking at it, And thanks to organizations outside of the court system and outside of government, they're making sure that we're taking a look at it. And so there is a national push, a national effort around it, and it is not going to go away. And what I'm finding out is that people do care. I guess the problem is that maybe folks just don't know how to get it done, because there is one answer to it, but every time you come up with an answer around criminal justice that creates fairness, it reduces revenue, and that is where we get stalled, because when you say fines and fees, it's not fair. When you say that bonds and bail, it's not fair. The only way that you're going to really be able to fix it and do it right, it is going to decrease the amount of revenue that comes through the criminal justice system and the criminal courts. But again, the criminal justice system should not be paid for on the backs of poor people. It's just a wrong. It was a wrong that was created decades ago, and it needs to be corrected.
Okay, so for those folks who are going like, okay, the fees and the fines, can you kind of explain in a kind of a general standpoint, what are we talking about? What do people pay? What do they owe when they come into the system?
Well, there's fines for the particular crime that are statutory,
Mhm.
and there are fees that you pay for coming into the courts, and it's just pretty simple. I mean, there are hundreds of fines, and there are numerous fees for different courts and different programs, and for your probation. A lot of just their fees that we've got hundreds. I mean, that's what our department does. We have to met out all the fines and fees that go to the state, to the metro government, to or services, to the district attorney, to they go all over the place. And so it is it's too much, Jim, to try to explain in this period that we have. But they're when you walk into the courtroom, the fines and fees just start to be calculated based on what. If you're arrested, you have fines and you have fees that you have to pay. As you go through that process, you got to. I mean, it's just every turn you make, there is a fee, and of course the fine basically goes with the crime, the type of crime.
I think it would be, well, let me ask you two questions on that one. How much that all is collected through your office? It eventually gets paid through the criminal court clerk's office, and that goes to help actually fund your office, correct?
No,
it doesn't. Where does it go? Where does it go?
Fee-based. That's Rooker Circuit Court. We do all collections on the back end, and we can control what we're collecting. If we have 40,000 cases heard in the courts one year, then fees and fines will be big. If we only have 20,000 in another year, they'll be smaller. So every time there's a reform made, just like jail fees through the council, where somebody had to pay $44 a day to be in jail, the council voted to end that. Well, that $44 a day was being charged, and we were responsible for collecting it. Well, now they don't have to pay it anymore. That is revenue gone. I say that reduction in revenue is the cost of doing business fairly and correctly. But my office is not funded through fines and fees.
Okay.
My office is funded through taxpayer money, metro government, and our collections that we do go back into the general fund, those that we have not dispersed uh, to the different agencies and organizations. So we do not operate off fines and fees.
So, and I appreciate you clearing that up, just because I couldn't remember. Do you know off the top of your head how much? Now, obviously, we just had a pandemic. How much typically on the average year is collected in terms of fees and fines that are collected that do go back into the general fund? And you may not know off the top of your head. We can look it up. I was just curious.
It has been, and you know, I know that Stephanie is listening, and if Stephanie wants to text me and make it more correct, she can do that. But it has been as high as $5 million, and now it's down around 2 million. And as we reform, it could go lower. And
Right.
so, and if I'm wrong, Stephanie, I'll wait for that text to pop up and she can correct me. Yeah,
That's okay. I get texts from people all the time telling me my mistakes and telling me what I said wrong. So okay, so we don't have much time left, which is really interesting, Howard, because I always have a series of questions that come in.
She did say almost 73% of the fees that we collect go back into the general fund.
Go back into the general fund. Okay.
Okay.
Well, what I was going to say was that I have a list of questions from the week, and I got to one of them, which means that this was a great conversation because we just talked, which is, you've been great, and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to look really quickly. I know that we have school board member Sharon Gentry on the call. She's been on for a little while.
Lord, that's a technology question. Go ahead.
Well, no, she's on. Here is the, let me see, we got all kinds of stuff flying in the chat box. Well, while I'm looking at these real quick, I had a question that has been bothering me ever since we started this conversation. What position did you play on the football team? What position did you play when you went to Florida A&M?
Well, let's start with Pearl High because we won this. We were the first African-American high school to win the state championship. I was the captain, and I played offensive guard, defensive linebacker, and I snapped on punts and extra points, and I never came off the field. When I went to Florida A&M, I started playing as an offensive guard, but I was my freshman year, I was a special team player. I led it my freshman year. I led the team in tackles on special teams, and I was flipping over to linebacker in my second year, but I got hurt and ended up having to end my career. So that was the extent of my football career.
And let me ask you this: so I didn't know when we first met that you broadcast the TSU Tigers. Did you do football and basketball?
Did football for starting in 1974. I did basketball for about 3 years. I didn't like it because it moves too fast and my brain doesn't go in that speed. And so I stayed with football, and I just retired from doing the podcast for TSU this year. So 1974, I had a couple years when I was AD, a few years when I was AD, I didn't broadcast, and a year or two that I didn't. And also had a radio talk show on 560 for 11 years.
Well,
Sports.
Several things. So people are asking whether you would be willing to come back at some point, and I hope you would. There are a million questions in the chat box that I think we'll hold and we'll send to you, and we'll see if we can respond back, because it's now 11 o'clock, which means that we're supposed to end. But really, really good conversation. I got one more question for you. It was the first question that we got this week, and I'll end up with this. And that is, what do you think about Eddie George being named the head coach at TSU?
Oh, I'm excited. I'm excited. But I'd like to preface it by saying Rod Reed uh, uh, is our guy. He's a TSU guy. He did a great job while he was there, and I wish that transition could have happened a little more smoothly. He deserved better. Nobody's fault, I guess. I won't blame him, but we love him and respect him and appreciate all he's done. Um, I think that Eddie George will do a great job. He'll bring a lot to the program. Don't worry about him not having coaching experience as long as his coaches have it. I promise you, Nick Saban doesn't coach a lot. Okay, he manages a football team and has great coaches. And if you want to follow all his coaches, they're head coaches everywhere in the country. And but he'll do a great job. He'll bring a lot to TSU, a lot of excitement. I'll stay on longer, but I think you gotta get off. And
Well, so we're going to have you back if that's okay. This has been a really, really interesting conversation. I don't think there's a lot of issues that I'd like to keep talking about, but we end at 11. But we've got most of the questions down, and we'll get you work back into the schedule, because I think this is something that people are interested in. Obviously, the mayor just submitted his budget. There is money coming from the federal government due to COVID. That is one-time funds. There's a lot of things that we should be talking about, but you've been great. Thank you so much for being a part of it.
Jim, hold on a second. I gotta have this to say. The mayor has invested in fines and fees, and that's a great step. It's a great step, and we appreciate it, and you'll hear more about that. But I want to thank the people who work in this office. We are, everything you heard from me, not everything, but the culture of this office is to help people and help people move out of their circumstances. And if there's anybody out there listening who needs help, we're here for you. And so I just want you to know that we have a great staff. I want to thank my staff, and we are ready to serve in every capacity that we have the capability of serving. And one person did ask a question about voter restoration. We have a process here. Just come in or call us. We'll help you through that process. And we have turned what took months or years into days. For people to get their voter rights restored. So I just want to throw that out there, because a lot of people just don't know that we have that process.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Howard Gentry, criminal court clerk, all around good guy, my friend. Just really appreciate you being on. Next week, we have Judge Anna Escobar, who is going to be talking about her human trafficking court. So join us next week. It's a beautiful Saturday. It's supposed to be a beautiful weekend. Go out and enjoy. We got really good folks like Howard Gentry serving our city, trying to make it better. Howard, again, thank you. Enjoy the weekend. Everybody be safe. We'll see everybody next week.
Thank
So
you.
long.
All right.